Okay, Laura, should we get started? It's 7:03. So I am honored to be here with everyone and to have this opportunity to collaborate with Inside Schools. My name is Maurice Frumpkin. My company is NYC Admission Solutions, and we're here for part two of New York City Public High School admissions. So welcome, everyone. I know it's a really, really busy time of year, and I am actually going to, without any further delay, I'm going to turn it over to Laura.
Thanks, Maurice. Hi, everyone. Very happy to be collaborating with Maurice and NYC Admission Solutions. And you can see my bio. I've been advising parents in New York City Public Schools for many years and working with Inside Schools. No need to go any further. I know everyone's anxious to hear the presentation. Our goal for tonight is really to respond to as many questions as we can. We got a huge response, and we're very excited to sort of go through the key categories of questions. So thank you very much. And thank you, Gigi and Stephanie, for the terrific presentation in Spanish that just ended a couple of minutes ago.
Absolutely. And my name is Maurice Frumpkin. My company is NYC Admission Solutions. And my background is both with the DOE and also in the independent school world. And this is a topic that's definitely near and dear to my heart. So it's a pleasure to be here tonight. And tonight we're going to take you through some of the common questions that you all submitted when you registered for the webinar tonight. And we are recording this session, by the way, so we'll get that out to everybody. And we'll take you, Laura and I will take you through a couple of updates and just some key information that has recently been announced by the Department of Education. But primarily this evening is to cover some of the common questions that have come up and you have submitted to us. And we'll talk a little bit about next steps in the process and just really quickly some housekeeping. So we always sort of caveat this by saying this information is subject to change based on any DOE policies that might arise in the future. The recording will be shared as I mentioned. And when you log out tonight after the webinar, you'll get a little quick 1-minute feedback survey. So we greatly appreciate if you fill that out. And this information is copyrighted. We will get the recording out to you as quickly as we possibly can. And I know I'm preaching to the choir. You all know this by now, but if you're applying to high school as a New York City family, it is a vast landscape of public schools and non-public schools. And part of the challenge is deciding what schools make the most sense for your family. Tonight, obviously, we're going to focus on the public schools and the specialized public high schools. But you may, as a family, be deciding to apply to other public schools as well. But tonight, we're going to focus on the public schools specifically. And I'm going to turn it over to Laura for some key dates. Laura, I believe you're muted.
So the DOE announced the timeline for this year's high school admissions process. These are the key dates. The application is open. You don't really actually need to fill it out yet. You have until December 1st. You can register for the Shazat by October 27th, and you need to submit your application by December 1st, and in early March, you will get your decisions. The timeline could change a little, but chances are this is it. And for those who may have had a child who applied in the past few years, you may think it's early. This is actually the traditional timeline that has always been the case. The pandemic upended it. And so for a few years, admissions started a little later, decisions were released a lot later, but now we're back to the traditional timeline that has been in existence for many years. Okay, the application's open. This is officially high school admission season. What should you be doing right now? Hopefully, you got your letters for access code to My Schools, and you should be checking your My Schools application. One, making sure you're set up your account, and also checking your My Schools application, which will have some personal information about the student. It should list the grades, the tier that the student falls into, and that only applies to screen schools that look at grades. If the student qualifies for seats set aside for students with disabilities, it should indicate that on the application. If you qualify for seats, priority for diversity and admissions, those students qualify for free lunch, and also the random number that is used as a tiebreaker. Those are all the key information that should be on the application. So do check that over to make sure that the information is there and that it's accurate. If it's not accurate, communication is key. Reach out to your student, the student's counselor, to make sure that the corrections are made quickly. Don't wait until mid-November to point out that thy grades were incorrect. And these should be your 7th grade record. If you attend a charter or an independent school, you may not see all of the information because they still have a few more weeks to submit it. So you probably won't see it until the end of October. That said, if you attend a charter or an independent school, I would touch base with the counselor to make sure that they are providing the DOE with that information, that they can assist you with getting a My Schools access code so you can set up the account. If you run into problems with that, you can always go to a family welcome center to access My Schools and set up the application. But I would touch base in the next week or so to make sure that they know that they have to submit your grades and everything. So again, communication is key. Register for the Shazat, the Specialized High Schools admissions test. It's open. If you're planning to take it, don't hesitate. Go on My Schools and register. Not sure if you're going to take it, register anyway. You don't have to take it, even if you decide not to. If you do register, study. Maurice will talk about Specialized High Schools more in depth, but just know that actually on Inside Schools, we do have a guide about the Specialized High School admissions test, and we do list some suggestions for free and low cost ways to study. It's not too late to study. You can do that. Don't go in cold to the exam, but register if you're certain or even if you're unsure. Explore your options. Now's the time to hit the ground running. You should have a conversation with your guidance counselor, talk about maybe they can make some suggestions of schools that think are a good fit. Ask them questions. Don't be afraid to keep going back and asking them questions. Attend open houses and fairs. There are no citywide or borough-wide fairs, but there are groups of schools, Urban Assembly, New Vision Network, the consortium schools, some Manhattan schools are banding together for a range of smaller fairs. So be on the lookout for that. And also we'll share that information in the Inside Schools newsletter, which goes out every week. Sign up for it. Be always updated with the latest admissions information. Obviously use Inside Schools. I will show you some handy tools in a little while. Read the listings on My Schools. My Schools will be the definitive source for admissions policies, priorities, things along those lines. You should definitely check the directory listing, but you should be looking at other sources. Schools have independent websites. Certainly since the pandemic, just about every school has created a decent website. Some are better than others, have more information. Really go over individual school websites because you can get a sense of what courses they're offering for each level. You can see what activities there are. A lot of schools have virtual tours that they're recorded in addition to maybe live open houses, either virtual or in person. So, and if you are going to an in-person open house, scan the school website. And by the way, every Inside Schools profile, school profile has a link to that school's independent website. And most importantly, set up a system to keep track of important dates. There will be submissions if you're auditioning. Take note if the school is looking at grades or requires a submission. Jot down questions you have to follow up with your guidance counselor, whatever system makes sense. Some people really love spreadsheets. Other people just take a pad and stick it on your refrigerator. Just make sure whatever makes sense for you, but have a system in place where you're jotting everything down. And we can go on to the next slide. Okay, back to you, Maurice.
Thank you, Laura. So there are 9 specialized high schools, as you all probably know by now. 8 of them at the top of the slide require the SHSAT, and the 9th specialized high school, LaGuardia, does not require the SHSAT. There's an audition process. And as Laura mentioned, one of the first deadlines of this process happens at the end of October, by when you will have had to register for the SHSAT if you're interested in one or more of those 8 schools. And at the same time, indicate which schools you're interested in of the SHSAT schools in your order of preference. So I think one of the sort of higher priorities that come up in October is trying to get to these schools. If for no other reason, because you're going to have to rank them and put them in your preference order by October 27th. So get to these schools. Every one of them, with the exception of Stuyvesant, I believe, has an event before the October 27th deadline. When you end up registering for the test, my advice, as a general rule of thumb, is to put down as many as you're willing to consider. The more, the better, because you're taking one test for all of them anyway. And it doesn't matter what your score is on the test. If you don't put a school down, then you can't be eligible for that school. So the more, the better. List them in your true preference order. I don't recommend getting into this game where you are anticipating what score you might get and what the score threshold might be for individual schools. List them in your true preference order. That said, the individual thresholds for the 8 schools from last year are on the DOE website, but just know that tends to change from year to year. And the qualifying scores for all of the 8 specialized high schools tend to range from anywhere around 490 all the way up to the mid 700s. It varies from year to year, but those are generally qualifying scores for the specialized high schools. And with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Laura.
Thanks, Maurice. So we got a lot of questions about how do I conduct the search? What matters? We got questions specifically about AP classes and everything. So I'm going to try to touch on a lot of things. The first thing I want to say is that please watch our webinar from March. That's where we go through a lot of not just the process, but what you should be thinking and valuing and questions you should be asking. There's still time to do that. You'll just now have to do that while attending the open houses. We presented it in March so we could help families of 7th graders really sort of start the process slow. All that information still counts. Just now you have to do that while you're actively looking at schools, maybe worrying about auditions and all those things. 3 main points: cast a wide net. I can't say that enough. You can't just apply to the same few schools that everybody is applying to. Some schools have many, many applicants per seat. It's okay if some of those are your favorite, but you need to really look beyond those. There are 400 plus schools. There are more than 12 schools that would be a good option for any student. And so you need to find them. No school is perfect. We tend to focus on the negatives more than the positives when we're looking at schools. It's human nature. If you come across a school that offers supportive environment and solid academics, but don't offer all the activities and courses, keep it on your list for now, because you may discover that there's some great free program options where you can do that after school. And so no school will check off every box. Keep that in mind. And while you're doing your search, look at a range of metrics and sources. No one particular data point, no one person's opinion should matter. And I want to go on to the next one, and then I'm going to go share my screen to after that. So we also got a lot of questions about students with IEP, students with disabilities. First, you'll notice that schools may have seats set aside or priority as like 20% or something along those lines. You'll see SWD. That'll be one of the indicators on your My School application if you qualify. How do you know if you qualify? Well, one, it'll be on My Schools, but what is the standard? At least 20% of your class time over the course of the week is you getting special education services. It can be a combination of ICT classes, self-contained small classes, and sets. How do I, what if it's a mistake? I thought I qualified. Well, chances are if you're getting sets for speech therapy once or twice a week, that's not enough. If all your main classes are ICT, that probably is enough. If you think you should have the SWD, or your child should have the SWD indicator on their application, and it's not there, talk to your guidance counselor. Communication is key. I'm going to be a broken record on that. And take care of that sooner rather than later. Don't wait until November to first have that conversation. How to find schools that are good for students with students with disabilities, special needs. I got that. We got a bunch of questions on that. My advice is conduct the search the way any student would. First, cast a wide net for schools that are interesting in terms of programs, in terms of courses, in terms of reasonable commute. If size matters, all those things. You start with all those same questions and concerns that every student would have. And then once you get a nice robust list, more than 12, then you do another pass and look for some indicators that school might actually be supportive. There is no one metric that will help you, and it's hard because you probably will have to ask the school some questions, because every student with disabilities has a different set of needs. Some schools may be good for some students and not others. We also got a question about ASD Nest program. That's for students on the autism spectrum with an autism spectrum disorder. There's ASD Nest and ASD Horizon. How do your child get into that program? If you feel your child qualifies, you can apply to it. And I'll actually show you where you can find that information on the DOE website. But as for if your child has a disability, if your child gets special education support, there are two amazing organizations, include NYC and Advocates for Children. They are the experts. They both offer free helplines staffed by experts. You can call Monday through Thursday. You can also, I know, include NYC, you can also submit a form requesting information and someone will get back to you. They have a lot of information on their site. And also just yesterday, Advocates for Children hosted a presentation, a webinar for applying to middle and high school for students with IEPs. It's up on their YouTube. I will share it in next week's newsletter. Sign up for the Inside Schools newsletter, because I will definitely share a link onto that. But you can also just Google Advocates for Children YouTube, and you'll see it'll be on the most recent selection, and it's quite good and very informative. So I encourage you to watch that presentation. And now what I'd like to do is quickly share my screen to just show a few. Okay, let's share screen. Okay, so Inside Schools. This is our main website, and I'm just gonna close this down over there. First thing I wanted to point out is that, please, and I know this is on our other webinar, but if you see that little person icon, if you click on it, that'll prompt you to set up an account so you can save searches and everything. So I wanted to show a few things that will help you figure out schools that might be a good fit. Obviously, attend the open houses, talk to your guidance counselor. The Inside Schools profile is really a portal to lots of resources about the school. This is Leaders High School. I actually just updated the profile on that, so you can read the written profile, but we got a lot of questions about data and metrics. You'll see our high school profile has lots of metrics and you can read them in graph or text form. Look at the graduation rate, but more importantly, one metric, and I'm going to scroll down a little bit, I may jump around a little, is college readiness. College readiness is how many students graduate with either test scores or meet other metrics that are strong enough to enroll in CUNY colleges without requiring remedial help. It's actually a higher standard than just the graduation rate. A school that has strong college readiness rate will likely have a strong graduation rate. So you should look for schools with solid college readiness rates. You can see advanced courses and a bunch of other things. I don't want to go through all the metrics. We have some on safety and vibe, and these were updated with the most recent data. But speaking to the portal, of course, we want to make sure if you look for this blue thing, this will take you directly to that school's My School directory listing. But I want to show you some, and underneath the stats, I want to show you, we have a link directly to the DOE's page for that school, where you can find a bunch of reports. Now, students with disabilities, for families, if you need accessible school, I want to point out under reports, building accessibility profile. We do indicate on Inside Schools if the school is accessible, but this will give you the full rating, and it really goes granular. So if your child needs to attend a school that is accessible, definitely check out this report. Another thing I want to point out under school quality is the School Quality High School Guide, and I hope this becomes a little less burdensome to get to, but when you get to this page, just click on that image. The DOE has now imported a lot of the school survey data to this new site, Panorama Education, so look for that. The default will be from the 2022 survey, so just click on that because the DOE has updated it to 2023. So now we have all the survey data. I wouldn't go through that for 40 different schools, but if you're going to an open house, look at this before you go to the school open house, or look at this if you've whittled down your list to 15 schools. Start going through this. And I want to point out, you can see all different areas, and if you click on them, if you click explore, you can see a lot more information on it. And this is important for students with IEPs. For every metric or survey answer, they also break it down into how different students in different categories responded. So students, English language learners, you can see how students with IEP status responded to a particular question. Click around. It'll be obvious once you start clicking around for that. But this is something that everybody should look at for each school that you're considering. Now, going back to everybody, Maurice, can you still see the screen now? We're back on Inside Schools?
Yes.
Okay, great. I also want to just point out that we have a high school guided search. And again, that was mentioned in the webinar, but now it's showtime. So you really have to look at you have to look at schools a bunch of different ways. And if you click on this, you'll go to your the high school guided search. It has been updated with the latest directory data. So it is very much up to date. Answer a few questions and you'll get results. Because I'm logged in, I saved my search. Here's a search that I did. And I want to point out, and Maurice is going to talk strategy more, but you can look at schools in different ways. You can sort by college readiness, so high to low, and that's an important metric. So start with that. That's the default, and start scrolling down. It doesn't matter if a school is 95 or 89. That's all very high. Some larger schools will not have college readiness rate as high as a smaller school or a school that screens exclusively for strong grades because they serve a range. But I can think of a lot of schools, some of the mid-sized schools like telecommunications, environmental studies. I was at Lehman High School in the Bronx. They have lots of advanced courses, lots of interesting electives, and they also have lots of support for students who are struggling. The key is to look at a school and not just look at a metric, college readiness rate is 85%, I want 95%, or 80%. Look to see if the school has all the things that your child would benefit for it. If they do, then you don't have to worry that there might be other kids who are on different paths. Students do not move in lockstep in high school. And you should look for that high schools offer multiple paths for depending, so students can progress at their own pace. So definitely look at that. And another important feature, there is a glitch in it at the moment, but we are going to correct it because we just updated the data. But you can search for demand, applicants proceed high to low and low to high. This is very important, and Maurice will go into that later, because with the tiers and the random numbers, you want to look for strong schools that maybe do not have 40 applicants per seat. You may want to look for schools that have 6 or 7 applicants per seat, but are also strong. And you can see that there's the visual. So this school, this is actually for the address that I entered, the zone school. That is low demand, but it's also a large school. Then you see red is high demand. So even if you're scrolling by college readiness as a sort, look to the right and look for the visuals. As you go down, you'll see orange is high demand, but not very high demand. Some schools may have multiple because they have some programs are high demand and some are very high demand. So you might see more than one color. And really use this search to just start poking around. You can narrow your search, and there are different ways you can limit. If you only want to look at audition schools, the Shazat schools, that'll be small. If you want to look at career and tech schools, that's going to be a very large category. And if you want to look for something that's special, for instance, in the newsletter today, I shared an answer to a question that we recently got about middle and high schools that are supportive for LGBTQ plus students. And one of their advices is in the middle and high school guided search. We actually have this for middle school too. You can enter in GSA, which is Gay Student Alliance, because a lot of schools have that club. If you want to find schools that have explicit support for that, and then click that, and then this will list based on this one. This was 35. There are probably more schools than that, but because I don't know if I have every borough checked off for this safe search, but you'll see now all these schools have Gay Student Alliance, and you can still look at you see the college readiness rate, you see the demand. And so use all those different tools. One other thing I wanted to point out on the DOE's website, where somebody had asked about how to apply for ASD Nest. This is a DOE's website, schools.nyc.gov. Under learning, this is going to be a few clicks. Click on special education, click on school settings, and then click on specialized programs. And that will take you to all the list of specialized programs. You'll see the autism spectrum disorders programs, and that'll be ASD Nest, ASD Horizon. And at the bottom here, you'll see this is the ASD program application, and it's available in the 10 most common languages spoken among New York City schools. Other things to think about, we've asked about AP classes, do they matter? Being challenged matters wherever you are. AP is not the be all end all. Don't worry about colleges. Colleges look at what your school offered and see that you took the most challenging courses for what was offered and for your path. Schools offer not just AP, but there are dual enrollments. A growing number of schools have partnerships with universities like Syracuse University, some of the SUNY schools, where the high school teachers are actually trained and accredited to deliver a college level class. And it's called dual enrollment because you take that class at high school and it will count towards your high school diploma, and you earn free college credit for it because it's college level classes, College Now courses. There are lots of ways to get challenging courses and interesting electives. And you should really look at from that perspective, what does a school offer that will interest and challenge my child, rather than look at a particular metric of how many AP classes it offers. I think I've covered a lot, and I want to send it back to you so that we can also move on to the next. So now I have to stop sharing the screen and you can go share.
Bear with me one moment here. Okay. Thanks, everyone. Did you want to cover this slide quickly, Laura?
We got some questions about special situations. And so I wanted to address a few that came up. One, if you have twins or multiple children, so that children, if you're guardian and you have two children who are the same age and applying to the same grade, it doesn't have to be that you're actually biological twins, but multiples that meet the same age, same grade from the applying from the same household. The DOE does have some, and you would like your children to attend the same school. The DOE does have a policy in place. Your children will get the same random number. So you'll be treated the same way. And if you want to ensure or do your best at ensuring that the kids attend the same school, you have to rank the same schools in the same order. And there will be an option on My Schools. Maurice, jump in on that to explain that, to select multiple application.
That's right. So basically at the latter part of the application submission process, so when you're in your My Schools account and eventually you click on submit, there's going to be an option to submit the same application for both siblings or triplets or whatever the case may be. So they'll give you that option. And if you click yes, then that basically triggers the multiples functionality.
Things to keep in mind: if there are screen schools or art schools, audition schools included in that list, obviously you're applying to the same schools in the same order, but if for some reason one student is in tier 1 and the other is in tier 2, that may be, there isn't the guarantee that they'll be considered the same for that. So keep that in mind. I'm not dissuading you from applying to those schools if that's what you want, but just keep in mind that complicates the policy a little bit. And have a lot of conversations about how you want to rank the schools, because your children may disagree on what their first choice and second choice and third choice. So start having those conversations now. You have a long time before you have to submit the application, but have multiple conversations about it. If you're new to the country, with the Inside Schools over the summer and the fall, we've been doing a lot to support families who've recently arrived in the United States. Particularly if they're counselors out here, if you have a child who is in 8th grade, or if our student just arrived and is in 9th grade and may feel that the school assigned isn't a good fit, know that there are international schools that are designed for students who've been in the country less than 4 years. So that's an option to look in. They are not part of the regular high school admissions process. So you need to talk to your counselor about the application process for that. You apply to them separately. But the other option is bilingual programs, and those are part of the regular high school admissions process. They will fall under, they're called screen language. What's the new term? I'm drawing a blank on the new term, but they're the screen language. And so they actually fall under the screen sort of umbrella, but what they're screening for your primary language or home language. And so those are also really good options. So look for those schools and look for those programs. And if you are moving to New York City, I got some questions about that. One family homeschooling and in another state, and they're planning to move and they want child to go to school. The key thing is you can't participate in the process until you're a resident in New York City. So you can certainly do a lot of research, but you can't actually participate in the high school admissions process until you're resident. Now, if you're moving in the next few weeks or before the December 1st deadline, yes, soon as you take up residency, you should, I would reach out to a family welcome center. You might be admitted into a school, talk to the guidance counselor too, but to set up My Schools and apply by the deadline. If you move after, that'll be a separate process and you'll deal with the family welcome center. If you move after the deadline. So, but the key is that you can't apply until you are actually a resident in New York City, but you can certainly do a lot of the research ahead of time. And back to you.
Thank you, Laura. So we're going to wrap up for the night by talking a little bit about application strategies, because I know this is on a lot of folks' minds. And Laura gave a lot of amazing tips for using a terrific resource like the InsideSchools website to build your list, because at the end of the day, what we're all trying to do between now and December 1st, that application deadline, is try to figure out what's the best way to fill out those 12 choices. So I want to talk about that 12 choices in the main application and optimizing those 12 choices. This is not like applying to other kinds of schools. It's not like applying to college. It's not like applying to private school where it's not like applying to charter school where you can apply to as many schools as you want. You've got 12 finite choices to fill out. And the big question that's on everybody's minds is, how do I do that? How do I make the best use of those 12 spots between now and December 1st? And we know, you probably all know by now, I'm probably preaching to the choir, that it behooves you to fill out all 12 spots with programs you're willing to consider. I mean, you certainly don't want to fill up a spot with something you're not willing to consider. And you're ranking them in your true preference order. We'll get to ranking in a moment. So you don't want to list anything you're not comfortable with, should you get it. Now, the ranking, sorry, I'm going to jump around a little bit, but the ranking and the algorithm matching is such that it's going to pay a lot of attention to how you rank in your true preference order. So you really want to be honest with that. And it's okay if your top choices are long shots. Where we run into trouble is where all 12 choices are long shots. So as Laura mentioned tonight a few times, we want to cast the widest net we possibly can. Getting to 12 choices that you're willing to consider is not easy. And I know a lot of families that we work with, they say, well, we got down to 6 or 7 or 8, but beyond that, we're really going to stretch ourselves. And I think it's really important to know that if you ever did get matched to one of your lower choices, it's only because you didn't get matched to one of your top choices. So in other words, when the algorithm runs, it's going to go in your true preference order. So if you didn't get your top choice, it just moves to your second choice, and your second choice effectively becomes your new first choice. So it's not as if all the seats are gone and you have no chance of getting into a lower choice. It doesn't work like that. In fact, there are many students every year that might get into their second choice ahead of somebody that placed that same program as their first choice. But I don't want you to think that you're wasting a choice if you rank it lower. And I don't want you to think that if you put something lower on the application that might be easier to get into, that the algorithm is somehow going to jump to the bottom of your application ahead of your other choices. So again, if you got your 10th choice and your 11th choice or 12th choice, which by the way doesn't happen very often, it only means you didn't get one of your top choices. But I would much rather be in a position where I'm choosing 12 choices and not putting the control in the hands of the Department of Education by listing fewer choices and increasing the probability of not getting one of my choices and the DOE giving me something. I don't want to be in that position. And I actually want to give a key statistic that the DOE has released over the past several years. Across the city, students who listed 12 choices on that application, 97% of them got matched to one of their choices last year. And I think that 97% applies for the last few years. So we want to get to 12. We want to rank them in our true preference order. But I want to talk a little bit about optimizing those 12. So beyond ranking 12 and putting them in your preference order. So when you're applying to schools in New York City, you're applying to a program within a school. You all probably know that by now. So some schools have more than one program. Some have one program. Each program represents sort of a gateway into a school. So if I apply to a school that has more than one program, I might take up 2 of the 12 spots or 3 of the 12 spots. Each program you apply to has its own admissions method. And that tells you how candidates are evaluated, how they're assessed, how they're considered for those programs. So again, as you probably know by now, and this is analogous to, in a lot of ways to the middle school admissions process, some programs are open, they're lottery based. Some programs have an admissions method of screened, which we'll talk about in a second. Some programs have an admissions method of ed-opt, which is kind of like a forced distribution. They take an equal number of applicants from different academic profiles across the range of academic profiles. Some programs require an audition. And some of you might live in the zone of a high school. Most kids around the city do not. But if you're outside of Manhattan, you might in some parts of the city. And if you're interested in applying to your zoned high school and you apply to the zoned program, it's a guarantee. And on that note, there are 2 guarantees left when you're filling out that list of 12. One is if you go to a school that continues from middle school to high school, that's a guaranteed choice. Guaranteed match if you're not matched to something you listed above it on your application, because again, you're ranking in preference order. And the other guarantee is if I'm in the zone of a zoned high school and I apply to my zoned program. So if you're in one of those 2 categories, you always want to put the guaranteed program at the bottom of your choices. But otherwise, if I don't have one of those guarantees, or if I don't want to take advantage of one of those guarantees, we want to get to 12. Now, a lot of people are also thinking to themselves, how do I assess my chances of getting into these programs? So I want to go through a couple things that are really important right now. So number 1 is priority group. And I want to be careful. I'm always careful with my terminology because I want to be as consistent as possible with the DOE terminology. So you might apply to some schools that prioritize certain applicants over others. You might apply to you might apply to a program that still has some kind of borough priority. So you want to be on the lookout because those sometimes still pop up. So if I'm a Manhattan student and I apply to Millennium Brooklyn, I should know that Millennium Brooklyn still has Brooklyn priority, and it is nearly impossible to get into that school from Manhattan because of that borough priority. So there are still some cases like that across the city. I might apply to a school that, like I said a few minutes ago, that prioritizes their own middle school students, in which case I'm automatically going to fall into a lower priority group. I might apply to a program that is part of the Diversity in Admissions Initiative, the DIA initiative, where those schools allocate a certain percentage, sometimes a large percentage of seats for families who are eligible for free or reduced price lunch, which requires self-reported family income, by the way. So if I fall into one of those groups, I want to know what the implications of that for me are. In many cases, it can make it easier to get into those programs. If I'm not qualified, if I don't qualify for free and reduced price lunch, I want to talk to my counselor about, well, what does that mean for me? Usually it can make it harder. Does it make it impossible? No, absolutely not. But I want to take priority groups into account. I also want to take into account admissions method. Now, I think Laura made an important point today in that I think there's sort of a common misconception that a lot of programs, most programs throughout the city, are screened programs. So unless I have good grades, I can't get into the program. That's absolutely not true. In fact, the majority of programs around the city are not screened. So I want to talk a little bit about the different admissions methods as it relates to screen group. So a lot of people call that tiers, and also as it relates to random number, which a lot of people refer to as lottery number. So I think there's a common misconception. I'm going to jump sort of right into lottery number because there's a sort of some misconceptions about the way these programs work. Let's start with open programs. So open programs are lottery-based programs. Obviously, my lottery number is going to play a role. And I should actually take a step back really quickly and say that, there's a really good video on the DOE website if you want to kind of get a start to understand what lottery means, what this means. What does the lottery number mean? What role does it play? The DOE did a really good 6 or 7 minute video. It's on their website. If you know nothing about lottery numbers, that's a great place to start. But suffice it to say that everybody that's applying to public high school in New York City gets this thing called a random number. And if you're a statistician, I am not, but it is based on a hexadecimal system. It's a long string of numbers, I think 12 numbers, something like that. It's a long string of numbers. and everybody gets one. It is completely random. It's not based on where you go to school. It's not based on your grades. It's not based on your name. It's based on completely random, but everybody gets one. And when you log into your My Schools profile page, you'll see what your random number is. Now, arguably the most important digit of those 12 digits is the first digit. And so let me explain that a little bit. The random numbers range, the first digits of the random numbers range from 0, so low number, 0, 1, 2, 3, all the way up to 9. And then after 9, it goes to the letters A like Apple through F like Frank. So 0 through F. That's sort of the whole range of the first digit of the lottery number. So I know that if I have a low number, that bodes well. That's a good lottery number. If I have one of the higher letters, C, D, E, and F, those are generally, the lower quartile, so to speak, of lottery numbers. But of course, it also depends on the applicant pool. I could apply to a program that gets a lot of applicants that have worse lottery numbers than me. So the applicant pool is really important as well. But I know a lot of people right now are asking about, how do I interpret my lottery number? That's generally speaking, the digits that start with 0, 1, 2, 3 tend to be the top quartile, give or take, of the lottery numbers. But the other important thing to know about the lottery numbers is they are not the be all and end all. I think there's a sort of a common misconception that lottery number is everything. And I see a lot of anxiety right now where families are getting lottery numbers that aren't that great. And they're really, losing sleep about it. So I want to kind of hopefully clear up a little misconception about the lottery numbers. So there are some programs where the lottery number is important, no question about it. But there are other programs where the lottery number is less important, and in some cases, much less important. And this is where when I talk about optimizing your application, that's sort of what I mean, because there are certain situations where you might have a better lottery number, and we want to take advantage of that, right? And this is a conversation you want to have with a counselor or with somebody that's an expert at this process, to talk about, how can I leverage these, I'm going to call them good data points, right? If I have a really good lottery number, if I have a really good screened group, which I'll talk about in a second, if I have a really good something else, if I'm on a top priority group, how do I leverage these good things? Now, and at the same time, I'm going to talk about, how do I mitigate if I have a bad lottery number, if I'm in a lower screen group. So hold that thought for a moment. So open programs, right? One kind of admissions method. These are programs that are highly, highly lottery based. They're completely lottery based, as a matter of fact, subject to priority groups. Again, so if I'm applying to a lottery program, an open program that gives priority to Brooklyn, for example, I know that students in Brooklyn are going to go ahead of me in line, even if they have worse lottery numbers than I do. So the priority groups can be really powerful. So open programs, pretty straightforward. Your lottery number determines where you are in line, subject to priority groups. The other kind of program that is subject to that determines where you are in line to be considered are EdOpt programs. Now, EdOpt programs are a little bit different than open programs, because remember what I said about EdOpt. There's a forced distribution. There are a range of academic profiles that are taken into EdOpt programs. So I see some students already where they see their EdOpt category in their My Schools profile page, and they see that maybe you're in the middle category based on last year's grades. Maybe you're in the low category. That's not a bad thing. In fact, sometimes it can work to your advantage. It's important to know that for EdOpt programs, an equal number of matches are made from each of those three categories, high, middle, and low, based on last year's marks. But where the lottery number plays a role in EdOpt programs is it determines where I am in line within each of those three groups. So for EdOpt programs, lottery number is relevant as well. For audition programs, they are 100% based on the audition. 100%. So grades don't matter. So if you're asking yourself, well, how do lottery numbers play a role with audition programs? Well, they play much less of a role. Now, there are some situations, and this is good questions for schools when you talk to them. There are some situations where, let's say you get the same score on an audition as some other students. The lottery number then acts as the tiebreaker. So there are certain situations where lottery number still plays a role with audition programs, but it plays much less of a role, arguably, because it's all about the audition. Similarly, I'm going to transition into screen programs, which I know a lot of you want to hear about. So there are kind of two types of screen programs, right? There are screen programs that I call purely screen programs. There's no extra assignment, what the DOE calls an assessment. There's no extra assignment. It's just purely screened. It's just based on grades, right? You fall into a screen group based on last year's, the average of your core courses. And you will most likely know that by now, especially if you're in a public school, because you'll get your screen group on your My Schools profile page. So you might be in screen group 1, you might be in screen group 2, et cetera, et cetera. And that does play a role in terms of where you are in line for purely screen programs. Now, where does the lottery number play a role in that situation? Well, your lottery number determines where you are in line within your screened group. So I could be in the top screen group and have a terrible lottery number, and I will be ahead of somebody that is in the second screen group with a terrific lottery number. And remember, this is still subject to priority groups, borough priority, free and reduced slice lunch, et cetera, subject to those priority groups as well. I know it's confusing, but they're purely screen programs. So if I do not fall in the top screen group, do I want to pay attention to that? Do I want to be conscious of what screen group I'm in? Absolutely. And will lottery number play a role? Absolutely. And I come back to that concept in a second. Then we've got the second type of screen program, which is what the DOE calls screen program with an assessment. And these are programs that sometimes look at grades, not all the time, but they also have an assessment. And there's a page on the DOE website that gives a list of all these programs. There are maybe 20, 25 of these programs across the city that have some kind of extra assignment, an essay, an online activity, sometimes a video, these kinds of things. So these programs put much more weight on their assessment, whatever it may be. Now, some of them still count grades. Sometimes it's 50-50 grades and assessment. Sometimes it's 80-20. It depends on the school. You'll see that all on the chart on the DOE website. But if you're thinking to yourself, well, that sounds kind of like audition programs that put much greater weight on the audition, and I'm scored on the audition, and similarly, I'm going to be scored on the assessment, you're exactly right. And in fact, there are 3 or 4 or 5 screen programs with an assessment that don't care about grades at all. The iSchool and Institute for Collaborative Education and School of the Future and ICE, they're 100% assessment. So I'm kind of evolving this conversation into optimizing your application. Like if I'm worried about grades, if I'm worried about what screen group I'm in, guess what? I might want to gravitate more towards programs, whether they be open programs or EdOp programs or screen programs with an assessment or audition programs that don't care nearly as much about grades, don't care nearly as much about screen groups. If I'm worried about my lottery number, well, I might gravitate towards programs that put much less weight on the lottery number. Those might be screen programs with an assessment. Those might be audition programs. And I want to also talk about Laura emphasized the importance, and I want to underline this, the importance of the applicant to seat ratio. There's a much bigger difference if I'm applying to a program that has an applicant to seat ratio of 20-1 and 30-1 and 40-1 versus programs that have ratios of 10-1 and 5-1 and even under that. It's pretty intuitive, but I know if I'm applying to a program that's 20-1, even forgetting about what the admissions method is, it could be a lottery program. I should know that it's going to be more competitive because that program is in more demand. So the question often comes up is, you're telling me that I need to diversify my application. What should I be looking for? What's the science here? What's the breakdown of the different programs I should look at? And the reality is that it is really subjective and very much based on your individual student and their profile and all these data points. And this is why I encourage you to talk to your counselor about how to optimize your list. But there are programs that you can emphasize and gravitate towards that can help you mitigate against some of the things that I just talked about, whether it's a bad lottery number, a lower screen group, or both, or both. But this applicant to seat ratio is really, really powerful. And I can tell you, because I've done plenty of these searches, if you're feeling like, well, the DOE is telling me to look for lower applicant to seat ratios and I'm not finding any good schools, I can tell you, I have found them. I'm not here to mention schools tonight, and I think Laura can probably vouch for me, but there are some really good schools that have lower applicant to seat ratios. And yes, I'm talking about some programs that are under 5-to-1 applicant to seat ratio. So it's all these data points combined. It's putting the puzzle together. Absolutely. But so number one, we want to get to 12. Number two, we want to rank in preference order. Number three, we want to diversify, but we also want to take advantage of the things that we have going for us and mitigate against the things that we don't have going for us. And we want to talk to our counselor to get advice, because they've been through this before, and we don't expect you to be experts at all this stuff. But there are ways to do it where you can fill up programs with programs that can be great fits for your kids, and where you can be comfortable getting to 12. And I echo Laura's sentiment that you can get to 12. I mean, I have this conversation all the time this time of year. Families say to me, Maurice, there's no way I'm going to get to 12. And I say, we're going to do it. We're going to make it happen. And trust me, I'm going to give you some programs that you're comfortable with. So work with whoever you're working with, whatever counselor you're working with, and I'm confident we can get there. And I'm going to, I think, I'm just, before I turn it back over to Laura to wrap up, I'm just going to give my contact information. And, I'm happy to talk to any of you about how we can work with you or work with your school community, about, how we can support you all through this. And, but that's my contact information. We'll send it out in the recording as well. And with that, I'm going to turn it back to Laura.
Thank you, Maurice. Please use InsideSchools. It's a free resource for all New York City families. I will give a pitch that we are a nonprofit. We're a small nonprofit that does many big things, and our ambition is to uncomplicate this system and give as much information as we can. It's costly to do that, so we do welcome donations if we've helped you in the past, or small donations. We love it. So please consider a donation if we're helping you or have helped you in the past. But all the ways you can use InsideSchools: read our profiles, use our guided search. We have admissions guides on what to expect in high school, tips for on a school tour, going to a fair, tips for finding free and low-cost ways to study for the Shazat. We have free weekly newsletters in English and Spanish. And then we have this whole community forum, InsideSchools Plus, where we will post notifications. You can message the InsideSchools team. We also, on the homepage of InsideSchools now, there's an Ask Us question. You can ask us questions along those lines. So please use our resources as much as you can, and just keep coming back. Keep coming back. Really work the guided search results page to look at college readiness, to look at the applicants per seat. If you have IEPs, look at the graduate for students with IEPs. That's actually on the high school profile page. Really work all those different things on the profile page and the guided search, and you will find more than 12 that are worth considering. And then you will narrow it down to 12 before December 1st, but you can get to 12. And thank you very much. We're both here to help you. We will be sharing recordings of both presentations in English and Spanish. And watch the first webinar. And also the DOE is hosting a series of admissions events. I share links to them with the dates on the newsletter, and you'll see it again next week if you sign up for the newsletter. So make sure to attend those too. And we're here for you.
Thanks, everyone. My parting words: talk to your counselor about what their support program looks like this fall, if you don't already know that. See what support they're going to offer to you, and take advantage of that. Thanks, everyone. Thank you so much, Laura.
Thank you, Maurice. And thank you, Gigi and Stephanie, and have a great evening, everyone.
Take care. Have a good night.